right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to yet another episode of SafeTay Talks, where we are cultivating a stronger and safer culture for all of our fleet industries out there through conversation and technology. Very excited this week. We have Darrin Demchuk joining us, VP of Strategy and Corporate Development at Platform Science, which is one of Whip Around's preferred partners. So was very excited to have you on and just hear all the great things that you were doing. I know it's been an extremely exciting partnership from our side, but it's always nice just to spotlight you guys a little bit. You've been there for, it seems like, a good chunk of time, so thought you're the perfect person to come on. But so thank you so much for joining us. How's it going today?
Thanks for having me, Taylor. It's going great. Things are going really well, and yeah, I've been with Platform Science since we founded the company, which is we're coming up on the 11-year mark.
Oh, well, happy almost anniversary. That's pretty incredible.
Thank you,
I always
thank you.
like to say I've been here long at Whip Around, but you've definitely trumped me there. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, once you pass the decade mark, it gets interesting mentally. But it's been a journey. When we started the company, literally in a house by the beach, almost 11 years ago, and it was just a few of us who had worked together on a variety of other projects, development work, agency work, building not necessarily transportation technology, but like adjacent technologies. So doing IoT type projects, mobile app development, hardware, software things. And, it was just a good timing around that time to enter the space. There was a lot of change, both in the industry as well as just in society in general, the shift to mobility and all those types of things.
Hmm.
And so we started work on that, years ago, and took a couple of years to get everything up and running to the point where somebody could actually reliably use it. And then we've been scaling ever since. And so it's, yeah, a lot of different phases, but it's been a fun path.
Yeah. Well, so for, I guess, for any of our folks that are listening that, might not be as familiar with platform science, what is platform science? What do you solve for? What are the big reasons why people should be, looking your way?
Sure. Um, Platform science is ultimately two things in one. From a category perspective, our focus is on fleet technology, in-cab technology, so fleet management, telematics, driver productivity. But the two things in one part is important because from the day we started, we said, well, we decided a couple things. We said, well, we're going to enter into the enterprise segment, right? Go after the larger fleets first as customers. Um, and in order to do that, we needed to build a pretty robust array of products across many different categories. So compliance, safety, fleet management, productivity is some of the main ones. But we told ourselves, because we before we entered the space, like I said earlier, most of the pretty much all the founding team had very little freight or transportation experience, and we were very familiar with smartphone platforms and the platformization of the world. And even back in 2015, when we started looking at the freight industry, we were like, why? Where are all the applications? Why is this such a hardware centric software? You have to basically invest in hardware to get to software. And also, if you want to be a software provider for fleets and trucking companies and commercial transportation, you have to basically become a hardware company, and a lot of times to do it. And so we set out to build that array of products and solutions in those categories. But then we also, uh, you know, set up some founding principles of, well, we're going to end up with a platform. We're going to build this in a specific way where our own applications that we've built are built using development tools and software development kits and all those things you'd expect a platform to provide, so that once we get ready to go into the market to serve customers out the gate, we have all those development tools we're able to give to everybody else. And then that unlocks our ability to effectively provide an app store or app marketplace like model to all of our customers, so that they have choice, right? And again, thinking about like the smartphone platforms is, I make an investment in a phone, whether it's Android or Apple, and it comes with a bunch of software on it. But I can change literally all of it. I can change my notes app, my email app, whatever, or I can change none of it, or I can change some of it. And that is like very deeply ingrained in our approach, and it allows us to work with partners like yourself, where we have a product in the inspections category. We're lightly touching on the maintenance category, but you guys are a whole business focused on that area
Mhm.
to serve fleets, and fleets love it. And so it's very simple for us to just say, all right, cool, turn on Whip Around, don't use the products that Platform Science made in those categories, and everybody's happier for it. So that's ultimately what we're trying to do there. We also, as a platform, speaking to the hardware side, we work very closely with the OEMs as partners. In fact, some of them are investors, so the people who make the trucks, like Daimler and PACCAR. Um, and what we're working on with them is, and it was brought to market, is a native embedding of the platform, right? So instead of having to buy a new truck and immediately rip the dash open to install a gateway, you can just click a button on a web portal and it activates the vehicle. You can connect to the driver and drive away, right? And so bringing that like baked in, built in experience to every single vehicle is a very core focus of ours, so that we can produce that app centric world that we have now found we've all found to or come to rely on in every other aspect of our lives, right? It just hadn't made it to transportation just yet.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's so crazy, right? Because I feel like we've firsthand have seen this, crazy fast evolution of technology and how much it impacts everyone else's everyday life. And the transportation industry, I mean, arguably is one of the most important industries where you need fast communication, you need documentation for compliance. So, for that to be one of the last few industries to jump into that app ecosystem, is kind of crazy, but definitely 100% needed right now.
Yeah, it's you know, coming into it. So like my dad's he's a truck driver, he's been a truck driver my whole life, and I never really paid attention. It was just his job. And I wish I did, now doing what I do. But there's a lot of there's at least in trucking and heavy duty freight, there's a lot of truck drivers in America, millions of them, and it is by definition a distributed moving workforce, right? And then you layer on top of it the fact that the industry or the businesses in it, the carriers, it's a very competitive industry. It's differentiation can be challenging. It's all about operational efficiency and all that stuff, and so. Um, Change can be a scary thing for a business like that. It's like, stability. It's like kind of the devil, It's like, well, at least I'm up and running, and so, but it is necessary, right? Otherwise, you end up trapped in these kind of legacy operational models based on legacy technology, and the rate of innovation is just every day we've never seen innovation go this fast, and tomorrow will be faster, right? And investing in the right foundation to embrace that change and the ability to be nimble and quick is how any company can set themselves up to be set apart, right? To differentiate, to move faster, be more efficient, et cetera. um and so, we got, I'd say lucky. It was, any business, there's some aspect of luck and timing and things like that. And, there was the regulatory inflection point of 2015 when the ELD mandate was finally published, and the enforcement was beginning over the next few years. And that saw the introduction of multiple companies in our category, right? And it was that core focus on moving to a mobility centric, using a smartphone or a tablet or something like that. And then it started to unlock so many more use cases, right? There were so many drivers back 10 plus years ago where their in-cab device couldn't leave the cab. It was a curly cord attached to the dash, right? So you couldn't walk around and take pictures of
Mm.
things, or it wasn't easy to get a signature capture or anything like that. But all of a sudden, if you have a tablet or a phone, you can, scan paperwork, you can do all sorts of things that drive up efficiencies. And um, that's I'd like to say that we saw the opportunity there. Maybe it wasn't as clear as it is now, but that was what we said. Like, we can't predict what categories are going to blossom, what solutions are going to emerge to the fullest extent, but we can predict with a reasonable extent which categories
Mhm.
need some upswing or some innovation.
Yeah. Yeah, we actually were just on site with one of our customers recently, and we were looking at some of their forums, and we'd asked them like, "You guys aren't using like our photo feature? It's like one of like our top features." And we realized they started with this so long ago that they weren't able to take the hardware out of the vehicle exactly because of that. And they're like, "Oh gosh, yeah, it's been a couple years now that we're on the tablet." So it does change pretty quickly. Um,
Totally. Yeah, we run into that all the time where it kind of becomes ingrained in the genetics of the company, right? It's like, well, we've always done it this way. And then it's not, I'm not trying to be negative or anything, but it's, to really truly reach like full operational prowess and gains, you do have to like kind of look critically at everything. Like, well, why are we still doing it that way? Right? We could just scan this and invoice a customer or kick off a maintenance order in minutes or seconds, not hours or days, right? And that could be the difference between profitability and not for a lot of customers, and safety and all
mhm.
those other types of things. So it's super important.
Now, I mean, obviously, you said about 11 years ago you guys were starting and you had a vision then, for what could happen in the future. But there's obviously been all these other changes within the tech world. As you guys grew, between back then and right now, how did that change your vision at all? Like, how did you guys grow and keep up with the emerging technology at the same time?
Yeah. I mean, I think a couple things. One is I think we underappreciated the variability in use cases. It's easy, especially if you're coming from outside of transportation, coming into it. You're like, I don't know, it's a truck with a long trailer. How many different use cases are there, right? And when you start cracking into the different verticals, different types of fleets, and what they do, right? There's dramatic differences between a dry van trailer that's hauling like Swiffer pads or something versus a milk container that goes to a farm and fills up with milk and then leaves, right? And all the considerations come with it. And so there's a lot of subtleties and not so subtle aspects of it that we had to account for as things went on. Um, I think the first few years, it was the effort was along trying to get people to understand or appreciate what could be different in the future. And then there was a certain amount of an inflection point that I'd say is probably around like 2019, 2020, when it started to click and people were like, oh yeah, this mobile centric, flexible, application based, take the pen and paper out of the driver's hands and digitize this, automate it. It started to click, and that's when we really started to see the upswing and just general understanding of at least our approach, as well as the momentum started to build in terms of our platform and marketplace and adoption of that, right? And now we have hundreds of partners and even more solutions, and many partners have more than one solution, and it's become a core focal point of our how we provide value to customers, and that was what we always hoped for. That's core to the mission and the value there. And so that's been great. I think I think there's probably more and more incoming regulatory change that will happen, right? There's a constant elevation of a focus on safety, which makes perfect sense. But safety is rooted, or lack thereof, is rooted in a number of different things. It's everything from behavior to maintenance and uptake of equipment or upkeep of equipment, to just the general environment that the person's expected to operate in. And so I think we're seeing more and more categories emerge, or solutions emerge in categories that are either directly involved with safety or maintenance, or adjacently involved, right? And so that goes everywhere from direct solutions for maintaining equipment to things more of like predictive capabilities, like AI centric things. Obviously, AI is everywhere now. It's not going to go anywhere anytime soon, and so we're seeing more and more solutions spin up quicker. And I think the last thing I'd say is what's also been really cool to see is in the last 10 years, earlier on, it was, most of the people we were desperately trying to get people to partner with us. And they were like, who are you guys? We've never even seen you before. And there were oftentimes very large companies. They'd been in the industry for a long time. They had established their path. And so it was challenging to get those early partnerships. And then as we started to grow and it started to get easier and easier to innovate and deliver technology to customers, we're seeing a major upswell in startups and small shops, a couple people just like with a good idea, and we're able to work with them to help them with the both the technical as well as like solving for distribution and marketing and sales support and even customer support, which are key things that you need when you're a startup. Technology startups are generally bits and bytes, really good idea, innovative, move quick, but they're not necessarily rounded out in terms of robust selling, customer success, support, all operations, those types of things. But we can work with them to help them kind of get up and running. And we've seen a number of our partners, start to grow their businesses together with us, and that's been fantastic.
Yeah, I'd say that probably has to be, like, I would think one of the more rewarding things, right? Because it's getting a little bit reverse. Like, you probably, I would think, can relate a little bit. So, like, I remember when I was in that spot, what can I do now to get this person up and running? So that's really
It,
cool.
it's exactly right. I mean, early on, we were trying our best to make it look like we knew what we were doing. And which is what startups do. You show up with a good idea, and you learn the language and how to interact with customers and learn from them. And now we're still doing that every day. It's important to do that as a product company, but we're able to support others who are trying to find their path and help them get up and running, which is, yeah, it's really, it's a great, step. It's a great logical step down our path, and it's a lot of fun for all of us.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure now too, you're probably seeing more folks actually reach out to you guys for partnerships than vice versa, which, it's always the goal, right?
Yeah, we see it a lot, especially at like trade shows, right? Like I kind of joked before, when we were going to the early shows, we could, barely afford a booth, and we were kind of like sneaking around, like trying to get people's attention, trying to get them to talk to us. They didn't know what we did or who we were. And then, fast forward to now, and it's we, because all of the partners, all the technology providers are in that one room, literally, when you're there. It's, wall to wall conversations and new companies we've never heard of, new categories we hadn't thought of, who want to sit down and have a conversation. And that's just super fulfilling. And so it directly connects to how we've been able to scale things and how to,
Mhm.
and scale the breadth of the marketplace and bring in more advanced, sophisticated providers for categories that weren't really directly focused on well enough in the past. They were more like just a feature of a product, and then they become entire businesses, which is how I've always thought about your company, right?
Yeah.
If you think just about like the inspection process, you said it earlier, it's a form that, attached to the trailer or something like that somebody fills in, or it used to be just like a text box in a macro, and they would just the driver would type in what was wrong. And they didn't go much further than that. People didn't think of it as like, yeah, I don't know, it's like barely a feature. And now there's whole companies that's what they do very well, and that's amazing. That's how it should be.
Yeah, I think that was one of the first things in our early days that we saw is inspections, which I mean should be really one of the most important things that you're doing. And a lot of these are just kind of like a side piece of a fantastic system that just added on
Right.
inspections, and majority of them would have that little, no defects found button. Which is great if you don't have anything to report, but if you do,
Right.
the amount of folks that we talked to and they're like, I actually don't know if they're just sitting in the driver's seat, not getting out and clicking no defects found. So that's when, we developed whip around. We're like, well, why is there no software where that's not an option? And you actually have to force the accountability. And that's kind of where how it all started.
Yeah. I mean, it's honestly what happens. If you compare the regulations for vehicle inspection reports as to the ELD, right? So the ELD went to a much more strict enforcement model of like every single second must be accounted for in terms of movement of the vehicle and who did it.
Cool.
Um, and yet, DVIR, driver vehicle inspection reports, are, as you said, critically important, right? Like I always joke, like, you know, I really hope every driver's checking all their tires. There's only 18 things that touch the ground on the biggest, most dangerous vehicles on the road, right? Those things better be good to go. Um, that whole set of the law is under the regulation, or it's under the Paperwork Production Act is what really is like, that's where the no DVIR comes from, right? Logically, you'd think if there was no issue, someone would still have to submit a report that says, no, there was no issue found. I inspected all these things and it was verified. But there was some regulation put into place, 10, 15 years ago, where it was like, in the interest of reducing paperwork, right? Because everybody was doing it on paper. They said, you don't have to submit it if there's nothing wrong. But it's like, well, how do you know if they didn't submit it or there's nothing wrong, or that they didn't do it at all, right? You can't tell in a distributed environment at scale. And so it's one of those things where, not to, be negative on the government or anything, but it's like when federal regulations trying to help, because man, we're producing a lot of paper every day, but it creates a very different problem where it's like, now we don't know if people are inspecting the assets correctly or not. And that makes them unsafe. It reduces uptime and profitability. That's not good, right? Um, so I'm not necessarily a proponent of like really, really strict and regulatory change, but that could have gone a different path. But separate of that, companies like yourselves can just show up and be like, well, this is the logical solution. This is the robust, logical solution. Use this. And it should just click immediately with every customer you talk to.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the no paperwork is the best part.
Yeah. And you produce the same result, right? As what the government had tried to do, but in a proper way.
Yeah. Yeah, so I wanted to bring this up too, especially for folks, I'm sure a lot of folks listening in attend a lot of the same, trade shows, that we would be at. And I love that you had said, I remember when we are in, this little tiny booth because you guys have probably the coolest booth I've seen at a show now.
Yeah.
I have to ask, like how long have you guys had the truck? Like tell me a little bit more about that because it's a very, very neat setup. I was very impressed.
Thank you for that. Yeah, it's so for people who don't know, when we go to the major trade shows like ATA and others, we bring an entire tractor trailer, right? So we and the trailer, it's not like it's just a plain trailer. It opens up like a stage, like you'd see at like a concert or something, and then inside is kind of people have the opportunity to take like a tour of all the products, see all the hardware involved, the software involved, ask questions, interact with themselves, and so that the origin story there was actually basically because of COVID. It was early 2020. Lockdowns had began. We were all locked in our rooms or our basements or whatever, and we couldn't interact inside with anybody anymore. And we're like, well, we kind of need to do that to grow the business. Like, we can't stop growing the business. And so we said, well, what if we, you know, took a tractor? We have a couple tractors for our own testing and all that stuff. And we invested in a trailer and modified it so that we could take it to a customer site or eventually events once they open back up. And we could do an open air engagement, right? We could open the stage, we could be outside. It's covered just in case it rains or anything like that. But we could interact with people safely at that time when we had to do like social distancing and all that stuff. And so that's where it came from, right? We spent something like 6 or 9 months, designing it and then getting it, the trailer modified and all that stuff. And then we started taking it on the road. I think our first time out there, out on the road was like early 21 when it was still kind of, we're
Mhm.
kind of halfway between lockdowns and not. And trade shows started open back up, and then we started bringing it there. And we were talking about one of the presentation slides was about how many stops we did. And I think it was like 50 this year. Because what we try to do is we say, well, if we're going to go visit this customer or partner or whoever with it, what's in like 100 or 200-mile radius that we can go do, right? Because we're moving a tractor trailer around the country, and so it's been great. And what we also like to do is we like to showcase our partners on it at different events, right? Whether we're visiting a customer, it's a mutual customer or whatnot, or if it's at a conference, because it's quite literally taller than everything else on the show floor. It attracts a lot of attention, so it's a lot of fun to have it. It was a little clumsy early on. We were trying to figure out what we were going to do, but I think we dialed it in pretty well. We love having it.
Oh, that's so I didn't realize that that was the origin, and that's actually so obviously kind of I think speaks volumes as to why you guys were able to grow so much because COVID was one of the biggest obstacles for most businesses. And that was a really great way to, still be out there and something you can, obviously continue to keep using as you guys move forward. I actually talked to a couple of your team members and they were telling me how it gets like cleaned, like
Oh yeah,
detailed before, so there's a lot of pride in it. And yeah, I just thought that was really cool.
yeah. Yeah. We have a dedicated team for it. A driver. We have staff that does coordination and then logistics of it, as well as all the cleaning and all that stuff. And then all of our other teams, our partner management team, our product teams, sales and customers, all that stuff, also contribute depending on what the context is, what we're doing with it. So we've been doing more lately. Like last year or two, we've started to go to more like state level events, which are really fun. Like kind of like almost like a fair, right? Where it's a lot of different vendors and booths and all that stuff. And so it helps kind of round out the road show, right? We try to keep it moving. It's not really valuable if it's just sitting there. We got to take it somewhere. It's really a fun thing to do and people enjoy it. The last thing I'll say on it too is when we take it to customers, especially like larger customers, one of the interesting things we found, because people, the customer will ask us like, well, who should I bring out to that thing? Right. And we're like, everybody, like as many people as you want, bring all the departments, everything. And what you end up seeing or witnessing is departments that never really interact very often, watching each other ask questions about things and learning about stuff that they otherwise don't come across in their day-to-day life. So you see like safety and maintenance up there talking about stuff and IT and safety. And so you get this like cross-pollination that's really cool to see. And we learn a lot from it too. But it's generally eye-opening for everybody involved. So that's really been a fun part of it.
Oh, I love that. That's actually probably one of the biggest things I've always tried to advocate for. I mean, we're a little bit smaller here, so it's a little bit easier at whip around, but we also have folks in New Zealand. We have folks, a very small pocket in Charlotte, but the rest are fully remote. And
Yeah,
it's just, all of these departments should be communicating and talking and working together every day. But especially when I went to, it was actually a very cool seminar recently, and we actually sat down and did a couple different, like almost projects. Like we got some case studies and, how would different departments handle this. And there was a
yeah,
couple other different companies. They're mostly in the construction space, but the amount of folks that spoke up and, talked about how their maintenance team and their safety team don't talk to each other.
right.
And I thought that was so crazy because it's like, I feel like those 2 almost need to be in lockstep, right? And
That's
hearing that they
absolutely
even
right.
kinda sometimes butt heads, so
Right. Yeah, I myself, and we try to have it instilled in your like culturally is at the company is that cross-functional conversation is usually the most insightful engagement you can have, right? Because you're going to learn being, in the conversation, and you're going to watch people surprise themselves or I never looked at it that way, right? Seeing a maintenance person's point of view on safety, seeing a safety person's point of view on maintenance, and then watching them interact, and then trying to intersect it with like, well, what can we do for you technologically to help here? um is the best advice I'd give any company of like how to really narrow in on what value you can produce is try to break those silos down. Try to get people, multiple different parties in the room at once, because they're going to learn from each other just as much as you're going to learn from them.
100%. Now are you going on, like, majority of these, different shows and on-sites?
Me myself,
Yeah.
yeah, I go to the major events. I go to I do spend a lot of time with customers despite my job title. My focus is a lot on like growth strategy, go to market strategy, that type of stuff as well. And I also work incredibly closely with our marketplace team and partners like yourself. And so I try to go to as many as I can. I have two little kids at home, so I try to balance that out as best I can. But yeah, I probably go to anywhere from 4 to 6 shows a year, and then a number of customer sites when I can.
Well, I mean, I think honestly for your role, being in that go-to-market and that strategy position, the fact that you're, making it a priority to go see customers and get their feedback and speak with them, is massive, right? I think that's a big miss with a lot of companies. They're just kind of, focused on, all right, what's next? What are the dollar signs? Where's that going to go? And they kind of miss that major aspect of, well, what do the customers need? What is going to be most valuable to the folks that are already using us? And thus, growing our customer base in the future because we listen.
Yeah, totally. It's something we're significantly larger company than we were even just a couple years ago. Even last year at this time, we weren't as big as we are now. It was the acquisition we did, which we could talk about in a sec. Um, but we still try to really instill in everybody like get out in the field within reason, right? Like have engineers go talk to customers, right? Because once one challenge you run into as you scale is you end up with all these layers of separation, right? Where all of a sudden there's 4 or 5 groups in between the person building the software and the person using the software. And then especially when you look at like enterprise engagements versus like owner operators or small business, um, oftentimes you're selling to the someone who's never going to use your product. They're deciding on a product that they're going to have their team members or their team members use. And my favorite thing to do is, my background here, I was about 6 years, I was the head of product. So we were kind of getting up and running, getting to scale and commercialization. My favorite thing to do is just go do someone's job with them, right? And observe. Because oftentimes, like, when you're talking to somebody who's in a domain, like a safety person, for example, and you ask them about their day, it's going to be interesting, but it probably isn't going to align with them going through their day, right? Because when somebody's doing a high volume and high velocity of tasks, which a lot of roles in trucking have, what they're going to remember in general is the outlier, the exception scenarios, right? Like, oh, this thing that took up an hour of my time. It's like, well, what about those 50 activities you did in the hour before that, right? I want to see like the whole gamut of like, what are people doing? When are they exiting a product and going to a spreadsheet? That's always a good tell because it's like, well, either that's a good move or the product reached its end of value and it could go further, so they don't have to leave the tool and go somewhere else, right? Look for the notepads, look for the pieces of paper. I mean, a good example early on, I think it was my first ride along. It was probably 9, 10 years ago. Um, I was with the driver, I was sitting in the passenger seat, and we entered a yard. And there was probably a couple hundred trailers parked there, right? And before we entered the yard, he took out a notepad from his visor and he wrote down something. And they were using a different technology in dash time. This was very early for us. And I was like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Oh, I wrote the trailer number down." I'm like, "Why?" He's like, "Well, when I'm moving the vehicle, I can't use this device, and the trailer number's in the device. And so I got to go find this trailer out of these hundreds of them. It's just a vertical number written on the corner of the trailer, and I got to hook up to it, right? I only have so much time." So we just kind of slowly trolled through the yard, and he was just glancing down at his paper, looking at that, and it was like, "Oh, got it. Like, we need to make sure that we can bubble that up on the screen at the right context, in a safe way, so the driver's not tapping
Right.
around and interacting, but it just shows them like, hey, you're at the yard. Here's your trailer number." And so we architected things to allow for that type of capability. But that's not necessarily something you can call a driver and ask them about, and they would bring up, right? They would probably
Yeah.
bring up like delays at a shipper or something, which is still valid. But there's all these other little things, that these nitpicks that add up really quickly at scale, and you got to be searching for those all the time.
Well, yeah, because I mean, like we kind of talked about earlier, you get so ingrained and we've done it for so long that some people don't even realize that the little nitpicky thing actually is a problem until someone like you
That's right.
sees it and goes, "Hey, I can fix that for you."
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our products are on enough vehicles where it's tens of millions, about hundreds of millions of miles a day are being logged on these things. So when you think about that, you think of the number of stops and miles driven, stops gone to, miles driven by drivers, shaving seconds off, and then multiply it out, adds up incredibly quickly, much less minutes or hours, right? And there's some things that are unavoidable, but there's a lot of inefficiencies, a lot of things that become ingrained and get overlooked. That if you can make a dent, it makes a big dent. Little dents become big at scale because they multiply, right? And that's what you have to be constantly looking for.
Yeah. Well, you'd mentioned it earlier, so it was something I wanted to ask you about was, the acquisition, and that was obviously, a major announcement, in the industry. How is, tell us kind of more about that and how that's, been impactful for you guys.
Yeah. So we announced the intent to acquire it was known as the Trimble Mobility Division, right? And that was in September of last year, of 2024. And so the mobility division is really the telematics, so the fleet management in cab technology of from Trimble. And for those who don't know, it was actually a global acquisition. So before this acquisition, Platform Science served customers primarily in America, some in Canada, and there's some operations in Mexico, but North America. This acquisition included what was historically known as PeopleNet before it was acquired by Trimble.
Oh,
So the North American unit, as well as Europe and then Latin America, which is largely focused down in Brazil, right? So it gave us an international presence, right? And so that acquisition was announced September. It closed in the beginning of February. It's so now we're deep in the integration phase, integration in both the technical as well as the business sense. We've gotten to meet all our new colleagues. We've established the structure of the business. We're very focused on we're heavily focused on integrating in North America in particular, because we had dual operations there. We needed to combine those, but combine them in a way that produces value for the customer, right? It can't just be selfish integration. It
right.
has to be valuable integration. What that affords us is, we had a substantial expansion of our customer footprint, which was great. Great new technology came over. The North American division had been in the swing of deploying a new generation platform, next generation platform, which was much more aligned to our architectural approach, which was great because it makes it a little simpler. It's still hard, but a little simpler to integrate things and to unify those layers. It also helped us leap forward even further in our relationships with the OEMs, so that we're able to continue to push towards bringing this to a more native experience, more embedded experience in the vehicle. So it becomes a more software oriented world. So a lot more work to do. But we're kind of hitting our stride now, and we're thankful for it. But it was it transformed the company. We we more than doubled the staff focusing on North America overnight when that closed, and then that's not even counting everybody focused on Europe and Brazil. So it was a pretty substantial change to the business. Never when it was brought up to me by our CEO way before we even like started the diligence process, I was like, no way, we're not going to acquire PeopleNet. Bet you're going back 11 years. We've been competing with them and very friendly with them, but competing and everything in the market. And then we figured out a path, and now here we are.
Yeah. Well, congratulations. I mean, you guys have had fantastic growth. I can clearly see why. Obviously you've had a lot to, celebrate even the past decade. Is there anything that, you're really excited about either with platform science or just where, tech is going and in general?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that excite me and us here. One is that we're going to be able to bring to market a much more harmonized and unified product portfolio for customers, which should produce value in all directions, right? We're not taking one product or the other product and throwing it away and leaving one standing. We're looking at how do we best bring the best qualities of each together in a way that's not a burden for folks to adopt, but they're compelled to adopt because it's like, oh, that's even better than what I've invested in thus far, right? And what that then unlocks is a unified footprint for the platform to serve customers, the marketplace to serve customers. So, it should give us a big leapfrog forward in the footprint we're able to address as we continue to grow that footprint by working with more and more carriers and carrier customers. So that's a big part of where our focus is. A lot of energy is going. I can only say so much, but we have some pretty exciting stuff in the works in terms of making that OEM native path even more interesting, let's say. And so, we'll see exactly how the timing plays out and everything, but there should be some pretty fun announcements that unlocks a much faster path for technology adoption, a much simpler path for technology adoption. And we're really excited about that. So there's a lot of us are focused on that as well. It harmonizes with the first part that I'm excited about,
Mhm.
but it is its own path, right? And that's the whole duality of the business. We have two things in one here. And then as as we look longer term, we do have a goal of unifying globally, bringing a platform to international markets, most likely starting with our own divisions in those markets. And so we're excited for that. Those businesses are doing great and operating well. So our focus is primarily North America today, but that'll evolve as we make more and more progress.
Oh, well, I'll be staying tuned. Very excited to see all the great things you guys are continuing to do here. And for anyone listening, whether it be from, a customer or a partner interest, where can they find out a little bit more about platform science and how to get involved with you guys?
Yeah, so just head over to our website, platformscience.com. From there, you can see both our product portfolio and case studies of customers using it. We try to really embed with our customers and see how they're adopting both our products and others' products. And then there's a whole section about the marketplace itself where they can find out more information about products like yourself and others. And then feel free to reach out either through the website or call us, and we're happy to talk about anything. We're happy to connect you with anybody we're working with. We try to be as useful as possible in terms of like, yeah, just pick up the phone and call us, and we'll route you to wherever you need to be or handle it directly ourselves, right? And try to keep those white gloves on for the customer. So that they can focus on what they're best at, which is, efficient, safe transportation.
Sure. Well, you heard it here, folks. You know where to go. Darrin, thank you so much, for your time. It's been such a pleasure hanging out with you today. I know I can speak on behalf of all of Whiprod and our customers that we're very excited to now be a part of your journey, and just very excited to be able to continue the partnership with you guys.
Absolutely. We're over the moon about the partnership with you guys as well. Ever since I think we were introduced by a customer a couple years ago. So we're pretty excited about that. We're like, wow, look at this product. And so, thank you so much for being a partner, and, lots of opportunity to work together and to continue to evolve the offering to be the best out there.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Well, hey, I will catch you soon, and hopefully we'll be hanging out at the trailer next time I see
All right. I look forward to seeing you.
you. Thanks
Thanks,
so
Taylor.
much, Darrin. Have a great day.
All right. You too.